Hello everybody, Tracy Brown here. I hope you're having a great day or night whenever you're watching this. And let me make sure our volume's good before I get going here. Well, today's Friday, and so that means there's been some questions that have come through the hopper, and I want to address that. I have a lot to say today, so I'm not sure how long this video is going to go. It might be 10 minutes, it might be 20, so hang tight. All right, and I know I'm a little late getting on here this morning, so apologies for that. So you may or may not know around you that it is Eating Disorder Awareness Week, and this is kind of the end of the week. And you also may notice that I talk a good bit about it, but I also try to put in the frame of I talked about Monday how I'm super appreciative that the message is getting more and more and more out there, and it's super important that eating disorders impact everybody. You don't have to be a certain level of sickness to need help. You don't even have to have a label of an eating disorder. You could, I work with a lot of people who wouldn't fit any diagnostic category because I treat all the people the same anyway, so it's like, but I do know that sometimes feeling like things are seen and heard and legitimized makes it easier to maybe make a step forward, but you don't need to have that to deserve to, like, if food is taken up and body image thoughts and overwhelm is taking up too much time in your life or is holding you back from the things you want to do, and just the discussion, it is time to make some steps forward to get your life back. So that's what I'm going to say about that. So a reader had a question for me about kind of like the stages of recovery, so I thought I would talk about that a little bit. And again, you're not going to find a book, or everybody's going to have their own opinions about like what different stages look like. So again, don't take what I'm saying as like the ultimate end of the story of what things can look like. But I just want to give a little bit of maybe picture or context to know where you're at, but also a lot of hope. So if you hear these things, you're like, oh man, I'm at the beginning. Oh, this is going to take forever. Keep up your hope, because we all have different starting places. We've all had different amounts of time and different factors that have factored into why we're at where we're at. So don't do any compare and despair here. This is just about like knowing what to look for. And so it's nice to have some guideposts. It's just like with intuitive eating. There's a reason there are some principles. There's a reason why there are some, on a hunger scale, 0 to 10, some guideposts. It kind of helps you have some containment and some framework to not feel you're just free falling. And you have something to go by to help you. Now, it doesn't mean, again, it's the end-all, be-all of your eating experiences. It just means that, like, here is a framework. That's it. So all I want to give you today is a little bit of a framework of maybe you understanding where you're at, and where there is, like, some next steps, okay? So, and this is kind of like if you ever do any research, if you Google stages of change, you might see yourself in those things. That might be important for you to go Google as well. So I'm going to skip the whole stages of change part where you're like, I'm not even considering like getting better. I want to keep dieting, or I want to keep, like, I'm full force. I want to keep dieting. I don't think I really want to make changes. So this video may or may not be even close to where you're at. You might be kind of further along than that. But if you're somebody who's like, okay, like, I'm going to read some books or listen to some podcasts, and it's or maybe even reach out and get some help from somebody like me or somebody else. And it's like, yeah, I'm coming to this, but I'm feeling scared to, like, do very much, if any, little change. So you're at the beginning. And maybe every day feels like there are different parts of the day that you're hopeful and okay, and then like you could have a whole part of the day that's like womp. Feels like the bottom falls out, or you feel overwhelmed, or like you can't do it. You're probably still at the beginning stage. Now, don't get me wrong, usually when people start to do intuitive eating or they start recovery, the first month, we feel super pumped. We're scared but also excited, because it's like, I want to make some changes. I want to, like, have a life where I can see these good things happening, and it's happening. It's the beginning and it's new. What starts to happen is that when we are letting go just a little bit more, and we have more support, we can feel some goodness and we can see some positive change and there's a little bit of relief. But what happens usually after about, honestly, if I'm being really honest, I see they start to kick in around fifth or sixth week of like, I'm progressively doing some things. I'm being consistent with some things. You start to get to where it's like it's getting a little bit real. Like I'm feeling more emotion, and this is not. You'll think this is not working for me. This is too hard. I can't go any further. It might not kick in that soon, but it could kick in a couple months down the road. Whatever's happening, it depends on you, where you're at in your nervous system and how much window of tolerance you have for discomfort, or especially if you have attachment disruptions or insecure attachment, different kinds, or any kind of trauma. Feelings and sensations are going to start coming up, and it's coupled with like, oh, I'm eating too much. I gotta get rid of this. You're going to hear all that. I should go back to a diet. I feel too uncomfortable in my body, because maybe your body's changed or you feel more sensation. And we don't have a lot of tolerance for that change or those sensations, and we want to go back. And if you're feeling that, now you're in it. I wouldn't say you're in I call it the messy middle yet, but you've been doing some work, and now you're bumping up against like the onion. We're starting to peel back the layers. And so this is where I see a lot of us, we spend the most of the time probably in our recovery is like, I'm not at the beginning anymore, very, very beginning, but I'm in it now. And where you see a lot of back and forth. So I look at like a tornado funnel. So at the beginning, it's like, ooh, this is great. And the changes feel a little easier. Even though we might have more bumps. It's like, like you're actually going in the right direction, but there's more like disruptions and bumps in your day and in your week. What starts to happen as time goes on is like, more days where you have more insight and less, like more stability and more trust, but you're still having these dips too. Like you're having thoughts, behaviors you don't like, whatever, but it's not totally sending you all the way back to the beginning. Okay. It's hard to do that because it's when you open the door, it's hard to go fully back to what you know is not going to work, even though it seems kind of appealing because you can be numb again. Whatever. So anyway, that's kind of the messy middle. That's where a lot of people are, where it's like, I had a really rough day, but it's not going to stop me from not eating, or it's not going to make me go back to Weight Watchers or whatever. If you're going back to like full-on dieting, you're still kind of at the beginning, and that's okay. It's just that we've got some stuff to work through before we can go to the next stage. What starts to happen in this messy middle? And hopefully you have support around this time, because this is usually the deal breaker between like the length of time that you're in the messy middle, is if you're consistently with somebody who's regulated, who is able to hold space for all that stuff, who welcomes all the bigness of all your emotions, all the things that you don't really want to say to people, but you know that it's in your system and it's true. When you're able to be really honest about that and expressive about that, and you have you're having somebody like help you uncouple some of that from, like, let's say that you struggle with anger and it's directly tied to like whenever the bigness of that comes up, I want to go restrict or go back on a diet or binge or over exercise or whatever. Once you're working with somebody to uncouple those two things and what got that all messy in the first place, and you can couple that with something good, now you're transitioning to like this next phase where it's like, you know how to slow yourself down enough not to do the thing. It might be an option still, but it's like, that like I've got to find safety in my body first, and then being able to be very compassionate about that's happening, and then I can do the problem solving. Then I know how to use other tools that are more cognitive, because we tend to want to jump from like, oh, I'm feeling really bad, why didn't I use my tools, to, oh, I need to find safety first and relational support first with myself and others, and then I can do like, oh, this is what I need to do with, having a really great day with my food, or how I'm going to interact with coworkers, or be in a situation with people that I have history with. It's not always easy, but I can navigate that without feeling small and constricted again. And that's where you're moving into like the later part of the messy middle, towards where it's like you're good and regulated and you don't need symptoms or dieting anymore. So I don't know if that helps, but, and I hesitate to say like, well, what recovered looks like, because I know that's kind of murky. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about that. For me, I feel like I'm fully recovered. I don't have thoughts about restricting. I would never want to go back there in 1,000,000,000 years. My body's just my body, and I'm cool with it. And I mean, I guess I love my body, but I just have a different relationship with it. It's like my body's good. It does good things for me. When it has weird digestion or I feel bloated, it's not that I hate it or I think it's gross. I'm just like, oh, body, what's going on? What are you trying to communicate with me? How can I take care of you? So, oh, good question. Can following addiction models of recovery result in full recovery? Well, I think if you are using food as a tool to, like, let's say avoiding certain kinds of foods, I personally don't see how that would be freedom. I think it's maybe freedom from behaviors out of avoiding the food, but it doesn't really make food fully free. And just in my opinion, I think that full recovered status would mean like you're able to be around all kinds of foods and they don't have a charge. That's all been uncoupled. And there's freedom around that and you can take it or leave it. To me, that feels like full recovery. That would be my definition. Again, some people totally disagree with that. I'm just not interested in food being a source of like power at all. No charge. So that's my model. And I don't know if that answers your question. So I know that some people think that the addiction models have really helped them feel more in control, but again, it's something that kind of gets outside of yourself to like as not an idol, but there's something like if I, let's say, avoid sugar, then I won't binge. But it's like, well, I want to be able to like be around all foods and not binge or not see them as like the source of the binge, because really I think it's like the underlying survival and stress physiology and also an emotional like story around that food and a process around that food that's driving the binging. I don't necessarily think sugar drives binging. I think if you've got restrictiveness and fear around sugar, it's going to cause binging. Or if you have, when I say restrictiveness, either a belief around it, actual caloric deprivation, an actual need to like get refed, that's going to drive your desire to want those foods. So until all those factors are basically cleaned up, it would be hard not to want sugar. Totally get that. So I don't know if that helps. Okay, cool. Thank you for asking some good questions today. How long did obsessing over food last for you? Did being physically healthy make the obsessing go away, or did it take time in therapy? Okay. Well, I would say that it all kind of went together. I would say a huge percentage of obsessing around any kind of food diminished once I was at a more natural weight for what I needed to be. So, gosh, I want to give a percentage. I would say between 50 and 75% of obsessing around food went away once I was eating enough food and eating at least some of those foods that I was once afraid of. That was a huge game changer right there. And then the other 25 to 50% of the restriction, of the obsessive thoughts went away when I worked through my relationship with food, got rid of diet mentality, and stop trying to use weight loss and trying to get a thinner body as a way of managing emotion. So once that stuff, so really, doing intuitive eating was huge, but I had to get to the food and weight restoration part first, and then to be able to challenge those beliefs. And this happens at all body sizes, not just at smaller body sizes. I mean, plenty of people come to work with me in larger bodies and they're excruciatingly low in their food intake and they have to refeed too and get to a place, and then it's easier to work on any emotional deprivation, emotional eating, that kind of stuff, after the food has actually been more refed and we can trust that like we're gonna get enough food. So thanks for asking that question. It's important. It's vital. Like obsessing goes away by a huge percentage if we are eating enough food, because you're going to have like this underlying biological anxiety over just being starved. How did you first discover intuitive eating? Well, since there wasn't a book around when I was doing in my journey, I really did to think it back, like, well, how do people who don't struggle with eating eat? And I noticed that they had regular meals, and they had a variety of food, including fats and sugars and desserts and soda and all kinds of food. They had a big variety of food usually, and they sat down to eat it. And they usually, I noticed, like, they sat down and like there was hunger because they either talked about it or it was just kind of obvious. And I just did a lot of observation, and I kind of think, like, I was lucky that I had a period of time where I ate, quote unquote, normally. Like, I had regular meals and snacks, ate all kinds of food, and I kind of stopped when I was done, when I was full. I had memory of that. I know not everybody has that luxury of having some memory. It was a vague memory, but I kind of, like, had some memory, you know, of, like, I used to go to the table and eat, and then if I didn't really like it, I wouldn't eat as much of it, or I'd eat more of the foods that I liked more and less of the foods I didn't like, and stuff like that. So I had some memory of that. So how I discovered doing it, honestly, I started doing it because I was desperate, not because I was so noble or enlightened. It was just, I started seeing, like, when I restricted, let's say, carbs at the beginning of the day, that I would binge on it at night. And it dawned on me one day, it was really just like this epiphany, laying on the floor bawling, crying, like, I can't stop binging, what's wrong with me? It's like, well, why, look at my eating, what's my eating look like? Like, oh, I eat, like, pretty much the servings of carbs a person hypothetically might eat at all meals, but I would do it at night, like, every day. Okay, so what would happen if I put some of these carbs at breakfast, lunch, and dinner? It doesn't mean that I did that the next day. It just means I worked my way to it. And again, I also had some help from a non-diet. She would be considered these days a non-diet dietitian, but she wouldn't have called herself, like, an intuitive eating dietitian because I didn't really formally exist at that time. So anyway, I just want to put that, that's how I discovered it. And I had to kind of learn it. And it was kind of a learned experiment on a daily and weekly basis. And I did have some help and kind of talking it through support from she at the time was just doing more of an Ellen Satter model because that's the only person that kind of existed with books out at that time. And she had done some training with her. So essentially she was kind of supporting me through, like, regulated eating based on how we teach children. That was her only framework, and she was just supporting me from that way. And I was the one coming up with a lot of the experiments. So that's the kind of, and you can see, you know, all those of you who work with me know that I do, that's a little bit of what my framework looks like too. But with, you know, with the intuitive eating kind of principles, the language of that. But again, I don't necessarily teach principles because I just teach people how to live it and versus trying to follow it, like, to a T in a certain order. So hope that was a long explanation, but hope that helps you. I appreciate the questions. These are really, really good. So what I want to come back around full circle to is if you're really struggling with, like, the pain of I'm at the beginning or I'm in the messy middle, there is a way out. It's really going to be willing about, you know, are you willing to take risk? Are you willing to feel some feelings? Are you willing to slow things down at, like, a body safety level? And then a hyper compassionate, catching your self-judgment, catching the negative talk, and doing that in relationship with others. And then problem solving is so much easier. The process is so much less painful. So I hope that helps you. And I want to come back around again to the second full circle of this video is that it's super important to recognize that eating disorders come in all shapes and sizes and looks and ethnicities, and you're watching this and you're like, I don't always feel that seen or represented because of the way I look. It's like, even if you don't see that, know that there's people out there that get it and need you to reach out because there's no shame. There's no wrong way of looking or level of intensity. I would love it if you were somebody who's just like, I feel like I'm not that bad, but I'm kind of struggling, and I don't feel like I fit into the whole thing. I don't hate my body. It's just I'm worried about health. That counts too. That counts too. If you've got any obsession or you got any feelings of rebellion around food, but it doesn't quite fit what you see the narratives are online of Facebook or Instagram and the memes and stuff like that. But if you've got pain around like trying to do it right or feeling like you can't do it right, and the idea of doing intuitive eating makes you want to rebel and eat all the foods, but that would make you feel bad, you're included in the structure and using these tools too. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you so much, everybody who came live today. I really appreciate it. It makes these videos way more rich, when we're doing this together. So thank you so much. And because this is a really a week where all this is on your mind, if you know somebody that needs to know that they're thought about, that they matter, that they're heard, pass this their way. It's really important. And one last thing, I think I'm going to put in the comments below some of my journey. I tend to I don't like to talk about it too much, just because I don't want to be like, there's a lot of people who look like me who maybe struggled with disordered eating, so I don't want to be like another repetition of that and make people think like this is the only way you can look. But I also think it's important because I don't just talk about food in my recovery story. I talk about like some of the experiences that were driving that, and I want to make it about the food, but make it also like not have people feel alone in their life experiences that were drivers to that, and to cut some of the shame about it. So I think I'll post both of those. They're Facebook, YouTube videos I did. I didn't publish live here on Facebook. I'd only do them on my YouTube channel. It's funny. I don't know if you all are YouTube subscribers, but I tend to do some lives over there that I don't do here because I don't know, that it's just a platform that I do those on sometimes. So I do a lot of teaching and encouraging and tools here, and some like, that kind of all that stuff here. But actually I do more personal stuff over there. So if you're ever interested in more personal stuff, that's where it is. But I will go ahead and put a couple of those here because it's the week that it is. I want to share that more authentically as well. So anyway, I hope that all this is really helpful to you. I'll put those videos below. If you need help, please reach out. Don't wait. Don't think that like, even if this takes you however many years it takes you, doesn't mean it's hopeless, doesn't mean your life cannot be full and rich and satisfying. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.